We are very fortunate to be
Yes.
joined by our foreign correspondent, Amy Kellogg, joins us today at the diner with a look back at the anniversary and a look ahead. Great to have you here on this important day. We are always grateful to have you. Let's just talk about the anniversary and where we are.
Well, it's kind of a grim coincidence that these peace talks are happening, Dave and Hannah, on the anniversary, the 2-year anniversary of the October 7th attacks. It's a solemn day in Israel. Commemorations are going on at that Nova music festival where 350 young Israelis were killed, dozens were kidnapped. The parents, family members of hostages still in Gaza are clearly incredibly concerned at this sensitive moment. Interestingly, the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has asked for Brits to not carry out these planned pro-Palestinian demonstrations today, saying it would be very un-British, that this is a day to remember those people killed on October 7th. Meanwhile, the talks continue, and we are waiting very desperately for some news from Egypt, where the peace talks are going on.
Amy, it's just, I remember obviously when this happened, it was likened to Israel's 9/11. In other words, that was what drove it home for Americans to understand the perspective of the enormity of this and the level of loss of life. And it's just incredible to think that that there are something like 48 hostages who have never been returned. 20 of them, we believe, are alive, but how do we know the status of these hostages and where have they been kept? I mean, the idea that there's some sort of safe house in Gaza after all the destruction for these hostages, how do we know the status?
We don't know the status of where all of the hostages who are alive are at the moment, or at least it's not been made public. A complicating factor is the bodies of the deceased. Many of them are said to have been buried in Gaza City, where the latest offensive has been going on. Some of those Hamas members who killed the hostages and buried them are not around to point to where the graves are. So that may slow down the handover of hostages dead and alive.
You know, time is such an interesting thing. 2 years, it's hard to believe. I remember the day when this news first broke. A lot of talk right now about the Israeli government, its current approach, what's going on right now, but also the Israeli sentiment of the people. Can you speak to that? And are those two separate things?
I think the Israelis have deep trauma since October 7th. I think some Israelis are concerned about how the population has been desensitized to Palestinian suffering through all of this, which is another aspect of the very complicated story. And I think there is a cry for new leadership, perhaps, among a lot of Israelis.
Yeah, in fact, there is a poll out just today from the Israel Democracy Institute, and a shocking number here, too, I'll point out. 2/3 of Israelis say the time has come to end the war in Gaza. That's up 13 points from a year ago. But the one that really got my attention was 64% of Israelis think Benjamin Netanyahu should take responsibility for October 7th and resign. What do you make of that?
I think some Israelis will say that no other prime minister would have acted differently in the wake of October 7th in terms of such a heavy response to the atrocities. There are a lot of Israelis who believe Netanyahu is just trying to stay out of jail because there are corruption charges against him. I think Netanyahu himself is going to be very concerned with his legacy because October 7th happened on his watch, whether he takes responsibility for that or not. And I think that people will want to know how that happened. That still hasn't been answered. Intelligence faults, the ball dropped among intelligence personnel, warnings not listened to. There were apparently soldiers at the border, female soldiers who said something's about to happen. It wasn't listened to. I think another aspect of all of this is that he's really been in and out of power, but he's been the dominant political figure on the scene for 25 years. That may be too long for anyone, whether it's President Putin, whether it's, anyone, whether democratically elected or not, it's a long time. And I think that leaders that are in power for that long often lose a little bit of touch with reality.
Amy, what we've heard from some of our people on the ground in Israel, and obviously you don't have to actually go to Israel to know this, Hamas never lives up to its promises. They can agree to whatever peace deal, they can agree to whatever ceasefire, but then they break it. Is there a feeling that something's different this time?
I think what's different this time, Allison, is they've been surrounded. The Arab world is really pushing for this deal to go through. Hamas is clearly worried that if they hand over their only card, which is the hostages, Israel might go back in and start bombing again. But there are so many people on board right now that there's pressure on Hamas to finally give up the remaining weapons it has. And they really are much weakened. I mean, the command and control structure has been decimated. There are still fighters, there are still militants, there are still ideologues, but they're weakened, and the pressure for them now, 2 years after this horrible attack and the subsequent war, is greater than ever. And Trump has been pushing Netanyahu really hard too from the Israeli side.
Of course, we're discussing going forward, always looking for solutions. However, going back to this 2-year marker, I want to go back to what the people of Israel are experiencing, how they're commemorating what's happening today. Can you speak more to that? That 2 year, I think it reminds us when we hit those anniversaries of how traumatic that moment was, what was lost, and what's happened in the last 2 years. What thoughts do you have on that?
Well, as Dave pointed out, there's this poll showing that politically people are ready for change. That's one poll, but I think that it makes sense to me that people are saying that from what I've heard. There'll be a lot of very somber memorials today, particularly down in the south, in the Negev desert, where that music festival was going on. And a concern that this never does happen again. I mean, the point of the military operation in Gaza was so that this wouldn't ever happen again. This was the unthinkable. And particularly when you consider how strong the Mossad is, we've seen them, and we've seen Israel change the geopolitics of the region. I mean, we've gotten rid of mostly Hezbollah, right? I mean, that's been all but decimated. So, there's been a lot of change, but I don't think that anyone in their wildest dreams could have imagined that the attacks of October 7th would happen when you've got brilliant intelligence that has pulled off so many incredible maneuvers in the region in the last 2 years.
Yeah, the pager incident was legendary. So pulling back to the polls again, there was another poll yesterday. 4 in 10 U.S. Jews say Israeli has committed genocide. It's almost as if Trump sees the winds changing, and now there's some tension between Trump and Netanyahu. Over what do you think?
Trump was really upset about the strike in Qatar on Hamas operatives, which actually failed to kill the key negotiator, but killed his son. So this is one of the people who's negotiating for Hamas as we speak today. I think Trump is very concerned about the Gulf Arabs being his allies, our allies. There's money to be made. There are security issues. And I think the ultimate prize is Saudi Arabia cutting a peace deal with Israel. If that all goes off the rails, that's Trump's legacy, potentially, the peace prize that he's lobbying for. So I think
which is awarded Friday morning, right? So it seems far too early for him to be given credit for ending that war. I know that's what he seeks here, but it seems like the timing isn't possible for him to win that.
Yeah, I think that's the general consensus, although President Obama got it before he even settled in, really, didn't he?
That is a fair point.
Anything can happen, but I don't think there's a sense that he's going to get that.
Is Trump bullying? Is Trump driving Netanyahu right now? It seems like that power dynamic flipped.
Yes, absolutely. And people have said that he's put more pressure on Netanyahu than any other U.S. president. And yet Netanyahu comes out and says that there's no greater friend to Jews than Trump by a long shot. So I think he's actually managing the situation till now quite well in terms of finally putting some pressure on Netanyahu to end this conflict.
You could always get the Nobel Peace Prize next year. Doesn't have to be on Friday.
Yes.
Whatever seeds are planted now. So, Amy, what's the deadline? What can we expect this week? What should we be looking for?
Well, Trump was very impatient, which is not much of a surprise when this all started happening. It was, all caps, move fast on his social media account. But I think now he understands, particularly when we speak about the fact that some of the bodies of the hostages are going to be hard to locate. I think he's a little bit more patient, and I don't think there's been any specific deadline, but by the end of the week, we should know if this is going forward.
Amy Kellogg, great to have you here. We really
Yes.
appreciate your insights. Hopefully we can talk some more later in the program. I still have a lot of questions for you. Great to
Thank
have
you.
you.
Nice to see
Thank
you.
you, Amy.
Yeah, Amy, great to have you here.